Hello again, my collecting friends. We take this hobby seriously. I often wonder if an outsider was scrolling through YouTube and stumbled onto some of our videos, some of our live feeds, some of our discussions, some of our rants, what they would think about grown men taking this hobby so seriously, being so serious about cards. I think about that. It could seem silly to some, but cards are important. At least they're important to me. And I have a feeling that if you're watching, they're probably important to you too. They're important for a myriad of different reasons. They're important for Americana. They're important for history. They're important for around the world. Cards have been issued all over the world. They're important to preserve the memories of events, of sports, of the people that participated in those sports. And so to some of us, they're important. I had an interaction on Facebook the last couple of days, and it triggered this thought that cards are important and why they are. So I was scrolling through my Facebook, and I was in there as the Mangini collection. And for whatever reason, in my feed, it's all kind of stuff that I didn't sign up for. I don't know why it pops up, all kind of things. A lot of times I just have to go on there and say, don't show me this stuff. There's some guy that posts pictures of pretty actresses from back in the day. I'm like, why am I getting all this stuff? And I get these, they're like, I don't know, I think people put up these sites just to get clickbait, I guess to earn money, I'm assuming. And they'll spread false rumors and say Mike Tomlin said this about kneeling for the flag or whatever, just trying to stir up controversy. They're just lies, right? So I usually just scroll over this, don't pay much attention to it. But I came across this one, and it's a Pittsburgh Steeler group. And anyway, somebody had listed the top Steelers of all time. And far down that list, I think too far in my opinion, was Franco Harris. And he had him listed as a halfback. So I reached out and I said, actually Franco Harris wasn't a halfback, he was a fullback. And the guy comes back and says, well, I converted it to today's game. Today, he would have been a halfback. And Rocky Bleier would have been, a blocking back. And I was like, that's not exactly accurate. Because in the old days, both running backs ran the ball. They were all kind of tandems. And the fullback was usually the bigger guy, and the halfback was usually the smaller guy, usually faster. And they would use them both. It was a change of pace. Fullback was usually the short yardage guy. Now, depending on which running back was better, got the ball more. So, of course, Rocky blocked for Franco more than Franco blocked for Rocky, because Franco was an all-world running back. When he retired the second, leading rusher of all time. And so after I explain this to him, he comes back and he says, well, if you would watch their games, you would see that Rocky was just a blocking back. If I would watch their games, I watched all their games. And then he quotes some Madden statistic or some numbers. I don't know what they mean because I don't currently play Madden. I did back in the day. And then I realized this is a young person. He clearly never watched these players play, and he's going by, stuff he's finding on a video game. And so I realized cards are important if we want to preserve the history, because it's simply not accurate that Rocky was just a blocking back for Franco Harris. In fact, in 1976, Rocky Bleier rushed for 1,000 yards, along with Franco Harris. They both rushed for 1,000 yards. And it's important to note that this was in a 14-game season. Fullbacks, what we call fullbacks or blocking backs today, they only block. They might catch maybe a pass at a game, try to catch the defense off guard, maybe, run once a game, maybe. They're big guys. It's usually like a tight end size guy in there to block, usually, shorter than a tight end, but a big guy. And that's their job, is just to block. They're not really running backs. But in the old days, they were running backs, and you had sometimes the halfback was the better running back, sometimes the fullback was the better running back, sometimes you had a fullback and a halfback that were pretty equal in their ability. Jim Brown was a fullback. Walter Payton was a halfback. Tony Dorsett was a halfback. Larry Zonka was a fullback. It was a different game. So you can't just go back and change a player's position because you think it should be modernized. That's like going back and saying that Babe Ruth was fat and slow, so today he'd be a DH, so I'm going to list him as a DH. I mean, maybe a ridiculous example, but you get what I'm getting at. So here you have, a guy that rushed for 1,000 yards and routinely carried the football. This is just the way it is. So I started to think, cards are important because we're losing this history. We're trying to compare apples and oranges, really, because the game has changed. By measurement, right? You have the quarterback. He's a quarter of the way back. Then you had the halfback. He's half of the way back. And then you had the fullback. He's the full way back, right? In the old days, that's how it was. And so that's all been reversed. Now the fullback plays up front, and he's just a blocker. And maybe if they played today, maybe that's how it would be. But all the fullbacks I watched, they almost never carried the football. It was a totally different game back then. They might not even both play on the same team. So it got me thinking that going back, Greg, my man Greg, at Midlife Sports Cards, he had done a video where he thought that vintage football cards were the next thing to take off, or they're cheap, so they're probably a good investment. They'll probably be worth more in the future. And I had responded. We went back and forth a little bit. And, my take on it is that vintage football cards have always lagged behind baseball. Didn't have the long history, number one. Baseball cards were always number one. But the big reason is for young people, the history isn't preserved. And this is a perfect case. If you're getting your statistics from Madden or what they have to say about things, and I pointed out that the NFL doesn't do as good of a job as baseball, in my opinion, really promoting the old players and the rule changes and the history of the game during games, right? Because when a lot of us grew up, we just had books, magazines, the occasional documentary you might see on TV to learn about the old greats. And now, there's just so many. We're inundated with so much stuff. If you don't see it during a game that you're watching, you're not going to seek this stuff. I don't think these, the younger people are seeking this stuff out. It's all real quick stuff, because the paradox is the more we have access to every bit of information, the less informed we are becoming. And so you almost have to pound it over their head because they don't know about the rule changes. They don't know Jim Brown was a fullback. They don't know about the Mel Blount rule or the Tom Dempsey rule. They just don't know all these things. They don't know that Jim Brown played in 12-game seasons. They don't know that O.J. Simpson's the only one to rush for 2,000 yards in a 14-game season. And they don't know that shortly after this football card, they went from 14 games to 16 games. And now we have 17 games. All kind of rule changes. The game is totally different. And for that reason, I think cards are important. Because we can't just change the history the way that we think it would be today, even if that's accurate. That's not the way it was. Like, things were different. And so to call Rocky just a blocking back, I'm gonna post some links of Rocky running, and you tell me if he's the modern day blocking back. He was an integral part of the offense. He caught a lot of passes, and he ran the ball a lot. They used both running backs. And again, if you're basing it off of the modern game, what you see in a video game, I don't know what that is, but it might not be accurate. And I'm not trying to put anybody down. I'm not. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to point out that this is why cards are important. Because history gets lost, it gets rewritten, and I just hate to see that happen. And again, that's why I think, like, if you compare Johnny Unitas, who was at one time considered the greatest football player ever, or greatest quarterback ever, who at one time his 47 straight games with a passing touchdown was thought to be similar to, Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak. People just didn't do that. Quarterbacks didn't do that back then. It was a different game. And, if you watch the game today, it's all passing. Almost very few running backs even get 1,000 yards anymore. They don't run the ball enough. And they have running back by committee. And back then, they ran the ball predominantly. They didn't throw so much. It was a running game and really didn't open up until after the Mel Blount rule in the late 70s. And that gave rise to guys like Steve Largent, who could just run down the field wide open and catch balls. They weren't allowed to be beaten up because Mel Blount used to beat them up the whole way down the field. You couldn't get open. And after that, my God, the receiving records just started falling. And, so it's just a different game. But because by his definition, that the halfback today would be the halfback back then would be a fullback today. So you're telling me that Paul Hornung would be the blocking back for Jim Taylor then, and you're telling me Mercury Morris would be the blocking back for Larry Zonka and Jim Kick, or maybe Marcus Allen would be the blocking back for Bo Jackson, or maybe Tony Dorsett would be the blocking back for Herschel Walker. No, these were multiple backfields. And the first running back that I remember, and I'm not saying this is the first one, it's the first one I remember, where they used, the one running back pretty much exclusively, and probably, maybe the other running back, I don't even know who it is, could have been considered a blocking back, was Walter Payton. I don't ever remember, and now I don't watch that many Bear games, but I know he used to run all over the Steelers, and that wasn't easy to do back then. He was extremely talented, great running back, and I just remember him getting the ball every single time. And then, of course, the Houston Oilers with Warren Moon, they ran that run and shoot, and that's the first time I remember just a single back being back there. So things have changed. But my man Rocky, check out the links I'm going to put in the description. Watch Rocky run. He wasn't a bad running back at all. Man, he had heart. And he only had half a foot. He was never supposed to play. They thought he might have to have his foot or leg amputated, when he got hurt in Vietnam. And it delayed his career. For a guy with half a foot, man, he can run. Tough player. A team and fan favorite. And just want to pay him a little homage and get this off of my mind. Every once in a while something happens that gets you thinking. And sometimes it's good because sometimes it gets you thinking in a different direction. But anyway, cards are important. At least to me. And probably to you. Thanks for watching.